We've talked about one or two Pokemon lines that make people slightly uncomfortable. Whether that be because of where they live, like me and the ocean Pokemon, or because they have a certain body type, like the Jinx line. Something that makes the vast majority of people uncomfortable to be around are the Pokemon that look just a little bit too human. It starts to enter that uncanny valley and sets the instincts on edge. Combine that with the relatively common fear of clowns, and you get a Pokemon species much like this one. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Pokemon Care Guides, where we go through how you would raise and care for different Pokemon species in your own home. If it wasn't already obvious to everyone, today we'll be talking about the mimicry Pokemon Mime Jr. and its evolution Mr. Mime. Mime Jr. is a small Pokemon, standing only about 2 feet tall and weighing about 28.7 pounds on average. That's 0.6 meters and 13 kilos. Its body is predominantly pink, having a pink torso, arms, and face, and its legs are a deep blue color. On top of its head, it looks like it's wearing a crooked hat, sporting the same dark blue color and a white ball at the end. Overall, it really looks like a child dressed as a clown. And that comparison only gets worse when it evolves. Mr. Mime, well, it looks like a man dressed as a clown. Though the proportions of its body kind of look like a bug to me, but that might just be a personal thing. Mr. Mime is a bipedal Pokemon with 2 arms and 2 legs, and whose body is a riotous and confusing mix of the colors white, pink, and blue. Really, describing it doesn't do it justice, so I think this might be the first Pokemon that I say you all just have to go and look up to understand what I'm talking about. Oh, and they usually get to a height of 4 feet 3 inches, 1.3 meters, and weigh about 120 pounds, 54.5 kilos. Before we move on, I should also mention that what we'll be talking about here will be the Cantonian Mr. Mime, not the Galarian version that is Ice-type instead of Fairy-type. That also means we won't be covering Mr. Rime in this guide either. I know that Pokemon is somewhat popular in the Galar region thanks to the dance routines that it puts on, but you'll have to wait for when we get to the Galarian Pokedex for me to talk about them. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the guide and see if these humanoid Pokemon are possibly the perfect Pokemon partners for you. Enclosure. As with most humanoid Pokemon, and any Pokemon that shows this much intelligence, the enclosure is going to be fairly easy. The best enclosure for these guys is going to be having them live in your home. Having a Mime Jr. in your home is very much going to feel like you're watching over a toddler. And then when they evolve into a Mr. Mime, it changes to having a roommate instead of a toddler living with you. And to that end, they are going to need a lot of the same things that you do. For example, when it comes to sleeping arrangements, it would be best if you get them their own bed. I know that sometimes it has been observed that they use their pantomime abilities to create an invisible bed that they sleep on, which is an insane thing to say out loud, let's be honest here, but that's not something they do all the time. Realistically, the majority of the time, they have been observed preferring to sleep in actual bedding. Now, there are, of course, multiple options when it comes to this, but personally, I feel weird to have these Pokemon that look and act so human sleep on the floor or the couch. And I'm not even going to mention the same bed issue. Therefore, because of all this, I think that the only real solution here is to get the Pokemon its own bed, like a twin-sized bed. Where you put this bed is up to you. You can have them sleep in the same room as you, or you can give them their own room to stay in. I recommend the latter option, as not only does that give your Pokemon its own space, but it might also stop you from waking up in the night and thinking your Pokemon is a sleep paralysis demon. And realistically, that's it for the enclosure. Oh, there are other smaller things you have to think of for sure, like the fact that you'll have to either get them their own table to eat from, or get comfortable with them eating from the same table as you. Same with water. Thanks to how smart these Pokemon can be, they can easily be trained to use a glass for water. There aren't any special things you have to do to your house to prepare for them, like you do with the Pikachu line. Realistically, they might need some mental stimulation games like the Abra line, but they're often able to entertain themselves and work their minds through the day using their pantomime abilities. So that's also not a major concern with them either. Their enclosure ends up being pretty easy to contend with overall. Cohabitating with other Pokemon might end up being a challenge though, depending on how your Pokemon was raised and what evolution you have. If we're talking about Mr. Mime, they have a bad tendency to smack anyone and anything that interrupts them when they're doing their pantomime routines, which can be a major issue if you have another Pokemon that gets in their way, or, Arceus forbid, a child. Granted, this is mainly an issue with the wild-caught specimens of the line. Any Mr. Mime evolution that you get from a breeder should be well trained enough to not react that way unless they feel threatened. Mime Jr. isn't as much of an issue. The main thing it'll do is copy the people and Pokemon that are around it. So, if you try to house it with a Pokemon that likes to be left alone, or has a bit of a temper, then that can lead to problems. But aside from that, it's very much like taking care of a kid. In reality, you're going to be restricted to the Pokemon that can live to your house anyway, so there shouldn't be too many problems as long as everything is on the friendlier side. Availability. The Mime Jr. line isn't very common in the wild. First of all, Mime Jr. is classified as a baby Pokemon, and it's one of the ones that only comes about when the parents breed when surrounded by a specific incense smell, in this case the odd incense. As I'm sure you can imagine, that's very hard for these Pokemon to come across in the wild, so finding a wild Mime Jr. is gonna be pretty tough for you. Combine that with the already scarce nature of the line in general, and getting the first evolution in the wild is more of a pipe dream than anything. Which means that, for those of you that do want to go out and catch one of these Pokemon, then you had better start trying to catch a Mr. Mime, which might be easier, but not by much. For one, they only appear in very specific areas, like routes 218 and 222 in Sinnoh, Glimmering Cave in Kalos, and Route 21 in Kanto. There's also the slight possibility that you can run into one on Route 20 in Unova, but reports of that are spotty at best. One interesting thing is that there seems to be a population of them that's surviving within the city limits of, and people in Alola, I'm very sorry if I butcher this name, Howley City in Alola, which does make sense given the ease with which they tend to live alongside humans. I should also mention that the Trophy Garden here in Sinnoh has been known to stock Mime Juniors from time to time, so you might have a chance of getting one from there if you really want a Mime Jr. But for those of you that live in the Johto, Hoenn, and Paldean regions, then I'm sorry, you're out of luck getting a wild Mr. Mime. Oh, and for those of you in the Galar region, I'm sure you're already aware of this, but you won't be able to find wild populations of Cantonian Mr. Mime in your region, thanks to the prevalence of the Galarian form. You can find Mime Jr. though, as both lines begin at that point. If you do want to hunt one down in Galar, then your best bet is to find one in the rolling fields, but again, it's going to be rare, and if you keep the Mime Jr. in the Galar region, it's most likely going to evolve into Galarian Mr. Mime. That brings us to the breeding industry. And honestly, it's not that great. These Pokemon are some of the worst ones that suffer from the uncanny valley, like a little too close to human effect. Combine that with the clown aesthetic, which many people aren't a fan of, and you end up with a Pokemon that there aren't many people that are clamoring to get a hold of. Mime Jr. are a bit more popular than their evolution, but even then it's too close to a child for many people to be comfortable. The main thing that keeps these Pokemon from being completely ignored by the breeding community is the fact that they are easy Pokemon to own and care for, as we'll see in the care section in a little bit. Even with that one saving grace though, finding someone that you can buy one of these Pokemon from is gonna be a challenge no matter what you do. Catchability. On the off chance that you do decide to try and catch one of these Pokemon from the wild, then there are a few things you have to keep in mind. One is that it's probably going to end up being very annoying to deal with if you don't get the jump on it. Thanks to their psychic abilities, they're able to create solid, invisible planes of air around them, giving them their very mime-ish theme. Trying to throw a Pokeball at them when they have those all around them and you aren't able to see where they are is a major pain, and will lead to a lot of Pokeballs stopping in midair for what seems like no reason at all. To deal with this, you'll either have to tire out and weaken the Mr. Mime in a fight enough that it can't keep up the psychic shenanigans, or, as I mentioned before, get the drop on them from the get-go and hope that the first Pokeball works, or even a Quick Ball, since that's what they're designed for. Mime Jr. is a lot less of a headache to catch, thanks to the fact that it's not entirely proficient with creating the psychic constructs yet. No, the issue there is going to be simply finding one, but I covered that already in the availability section. As for what Pokemon you should bring along with you, your best options are Ghost, Poison, or Steel types. Remember, they are Fairy types as well, it simply doesn't impact their care as much as it does with Clefairy. And when it comes to hardware, a Pokeball should be plenty for Mime Jr., and you can probably get away with a Great Ball for Mr. Mime, but an Ultra Ball will be a lot more effective since you want to try and catch this one quickly. Care. Thanks to there being one of the Pokemon species that live in your home, and not only that, but being one of the smarter Pokemon species out there, these Pokemon have a relatively easy care section. These Pokemon are omnivores, eating both plants and meat, but they tend to heavily favor the vegetarian option. Thank Arceus for that, because the image of them hunting in the wild would be the foundation for a number of horror movies. Mime Jr. actually eats very little meat, which makes sense when you think about it. Since its psychic pantomime abilities are not as strong as its evolution, it can't hunt down prey as well. With Mr. Mime, you'll be looking at a larger portion of the meal being protein-based, but it still won't be a lot. As for how much you should feed them, thanks to how similar they end up being to human biology, most of the realistic diets for these Pokemon online are based on how many calories the Pokemon should take in, not simply weight and ratios of food. For a Mime Jr., you want to have it eat about 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day, divided among 3 meals. Only about 3 or 4 ounces of that should be some sort of meat, with the rest being a roughly equal mixture of fruits, veggies, and grains. When they evolve into a Mr. Mime, then that increases to about 1,800 to 2,100 calories per day, close to what a human of the same size and weight would have to eat. You want to increase the amount of meat to about 8 to 10 ounces per meal, the rest still being a mix of various fruits, veggies, and grains, now only giving them 2 meals a day. How you feed them is a bit of a debate among people online. There are some that think that since they're Pokemon, then feeding them like a Pokemon with a dish somewhere in the house is perfectly fine. Others, like myself, feel that having a Pokemon that is so humanoid and incredibly smart on top of that, I just find that to be a very weird feeling to have that creature just sitting on the floor eating out of the dish. What many people do is actually train them to eat at the table, much like you would with another person. It's really a matter of preference what you decide to do, but keep in mind that the latter option might take a bit more training in the long run. Speaking of training, you will have to do a bit of that with these Pokemon. Of course, there's the basic stuff like food training and bathroom training, which, a word of advice on the latter, teach this Pokemon how to use the inside toilet. They are way too humanish to be going in the yard like your Rockruff does, and you're bound to get the authorities called on you for that. However, one of the more important things that you have to train out of these Pokemon is their violent reaction to having their pantomime routines interrupted. They have a tendency to smack the crap out of whatever does it, and if you have other Pokemon, small children, or even other people who do it by accident, well, they're gonna get a good smacking. The best way to deal with this is while the Pokemon is still a Mime Jr, because at that point they don't have the strength to smack anyone, and their psychic abilities aren't strong enough to do any major damage to anything yet. What we're going to be doing is kind of exposure therapy, where we repeatedly interrupt the Pokemon while it's trying to perform, rewarding a positive or no reaction to it, and discouraging negative reactions. It's almost like picking up a Growlithe's food bowl while it's eating so they don't become food aggressive. But with this, you have to strike a careful balance. You want the Pokemon to understand that, while it might not like it, being interrupted is fine. But you don't want the Pokemon to think that it's not allowed to do its pantomime routine at all. That can lead to plenty of mental and emotional issues down the road, like neurotic behaviors, bad habits, and even more serious things like depression. Over time, your Pokemon should get used to the interruptions and not even react to you when you do it. Of course, if you get your Pokemon from a breeder, then this training should already be done. The big issue comes when you catch a fully evolved Mr. Mime out of the wild. At this point in the Pokemon's life, those habits are going to be fully ingrained in them, and it's going to be a royal pain to try and get them to unlearn that. Not to mention that using the method that we mentioned for Mime Jr. is going to be a lot more dangerous at this point thanks to how much stronger Mr. Mime is than a Mime Jr. At that point, you might have to get a professional trainer involved to avoid you getting hurt and ruining your relationship with the Pokemon so early on. Thankfully, these Pokemon are very smart, as psychic Pokemon tend to be, so it should pick up on what you're trying to teach it relatively quickly. Speaking of which, I should mention some of the higher level training you can do with these Pokemon. We won't get into it here as these are very much supplemental stuff, but thanks to the fact that they are so humanoid and they are very smart, there are many cases where people have been able to train them and teach them how to help out around the house. I mean, I've seen videos online of Mr. Mime vacuuming, doing dishes, folding laundry, the whole 9 yards. Now, of course, I can't condone you just getting a Pokemon so you can have a maid cleaning up your house. It is a living creature, and getting one just so you don't have to take care of your household chores is terrible. Teaching it to help out is one thing, but simply using it as an unpaid labor is something I won't perpetuate. It is a living being and deserves to live in a home where it is seen as more than just the help. With that being very clear, if you do want to teach your Pokemon how to do these kinds of things, there are training guides for it online, or you can even hire a trainer to teach your Pokemon for you. The last thing that you have to worry about care-wise for these guys actually only applies to Mime Jr, and the fact that it's classified as a baby Pokemon. For those of you that haven't listened to the previous guides where we talk about baby Pokemon, what classifies a Pokemon as a baby Pokemon are the facts that it's born through a special method, and it does not have full control over its own power upon birth. For some, like Pichu and its electricity, this can lead to them being dangerous and needing special care that can make them hard for the average person to care for and to have. But for others, like Mime Jr, it's less dangerous and more that they just need practice with their abilities. In fact, there is even research that shows that the control over these abilities is what triggers their evolution into a Mr. Mime. So, if you do end up getting a Mime Jr, then one of the things you'll have to do is play with it. Interact with it on a regular basis and allow it to mimic your movements. Stretch its abilities by doing things it's never seen before, taking it to places with many different people in Pokemon that it can try to copy, and always expose your Pokemon to new things. This will have the double benefit of increasing the skill of your Mime Jr with its psychic abilities, but it will also get your Pokemon much more used to interacting with the world and desensitizing them to new stimuli. I should also mention that if you're looking to have your Pokemon increase its skills and evolve as fast as possible, then the best method is to house your Mime Jr. with a Mr. Mime. Obviously, learning something from someone who is already proficient in what you're trying to learn is going to be much faster than learning on your own. Just be prepared to trip over invisible things that your Pokemon ends up making on the floor. From what I've seen online, it's a pretty common occurrence with these guys. Cost. As with all of the Pokemon that you can keep in your house, the enclosure shouldn't be more than the low category. Since all you really need to get for these guys is a bed, I can see it dipping down into the very low category, but if you want to get anything extra for them through the house, then your best bet is to just assume the low category. Considering that their diet isn't going to be much more than feeding another person, their food shouldn't be that much. With Mime Jr., it'll be less, probably in the low or the beginning of the moderate category per month. Mr. Mime will pretty much add another whole adult to your grocery bill, bringing it up into the high end of the moderate category, or even into the high category itself, depending on what you buy and where you live. The Pokemon will probably be the part that'll cost you the most. Thanks to how rare they are in the breeding industry, I don't see them being too expensive. After all, you aren't really going to have to wait on a list or compete with others to get one. But the fact that there's so few breeders out there, combined with the fact that anyone with a breeding program will be pretty much taking care of a bunch of other people, the price could easily slide into the moderate or the high category. Conclusion. Why are the creepy clown Pokemon the ones that make great pets? Okay, realistically, as long as they are trained to deal with interruptions, then these Pokemon would be great for anyone. Mime Juniors would be great for households with small kids. Mr. Mimes are great for people that just want a Pokemon that can really take care of itself. Both of them can make great companions for people of any circumstances. I honestly cannot see many flaws with these Pokemon, and the fact that it's the Mime Jr. line I'm saying that about makes me supremely uncomfortable. And that's really their only downside that I can see. If you don't like clowns, or the Pokemon are too close to human looking, then I can't recommend them for you. But if you're looking for a very easy companion Pokemon, then the Mime Jr. line could very easily end up being the perfect Pokemon partners for you. Thank you all for listening, and please join us again next time when we talk about the sharp-handed Pokemon Scyther and its two evolutions, Scizor and Kleavor. Have a wonderful night, everyone.